What's up, everyone? Welcome back. This is week 2 of the Impact Youth Corona series. Quarantine's making me fat. All I'm doing is eating and doing nothing else. How many of you guys had a similar thing where you're like, oh, I'm home and I'm gonna get fit. I'm gonna get muscular. I'm gonna get shredded. I'm just gonna work out. It's gonna be great. Quarantine's gonna end, and then we're just gonna be in shape. And then also, like me, you decided that takes work. And instead, ice cream is easy. I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting real tired of this quarantine. I love my alone time as an introvert, but even as an introvert, I'm kind of really bored. It's one of those things that, if you guys are like me, you never thought you'd say you miss school, but being honest, you kind of do miss school, don't you? A little bit. I spend a lot of my days kind of thinking and preparing and processing and kind of reminiscing a little bit too about the good old days where you could go outside. Remember when you can go outside? So one of the things that I was thinking about was when I first became a youth pastor. Actually, before I became a youth pastor, I was a youth leader. I was a volunteer leader. We did this camp every year where end of March, early May, we went to this camp called Lake Champion. Remember, this is up in the north. Lake Champion's in New York. It's this big lake with a bunch of campgrounds kind of around it. You know, this was like a big Christian retreat weekend, whereas we'd bring our youth group and we would meet up with a bunch of other youth groups. So it's like 500 students or 500 people in this one place at one time. So on the first night of Lake Champion, we just got there. We're pulling in. We go into our first big meeting as a big group of 500 or so people. And I'm brand spanking new. I'm talking this is my first youth trip with them. This was maybe 2 or 3 weeks into me even like meeting them for the first time, like coming in and like, hi, I'm a volunteer leader. I didn't know everyone yet. So I'm sitting toward the back, and I have some students around me. They're flocked more toward the other leaders who they know. And the first thing they do is like, everyone, just do me a favor, stand up. Youth leaders, stand up where you are. And I stand up because I was a youth leader. And he says, stand up where you are. Students, go give your youth leaders a hug. They do so much for you. You love them. Show them you love them. No one came over to me. It's fine. It makes sense. They didn't know me. It's just awkward. Just be like. And the girls next to me were all like, gosh, that's like so awkward. He's just like standing there. And it was awkward. All just looking at me, and then one of them started laughing, and because one of them started laughing, they all started laughing. But I was super disconnected, and it bit me in the butt. But why do I bring this story up? I bring this up because it's an example of a time where I was really, really disconnected, and it ended up being kind of funny, but it embarrassed me a little bit. That's kind of a bit of my transition for where I'm going today. Today, I'm going to read a little bit from John 15. A little bit of background here, right? So this is one of the Gospels, one of the accounts of Christ's life. And right now in John 15, they're actually at the Last Supper. So the Last Supper is when Jesus sat down all his disciples and they ate together. They broke the bread, they drank the wine. He said, this is my body, which is broken for you. This is my blood, which is spilled for you. That conversation. And that's where John 15 picks up. It picks up with this. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that does not produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they'll produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, and you are the branches, so those who remain in me, and I in them, will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. I actually love this passage of the Bible. It uses metaphor. I just kind of love metaphor. I'm sorry I'm using plant metaphors 2 weeks in a row. I used pruning last week and even mentioned pruning now, so apparently I need to get new material. What he's saying is he is the vine, right? And we're the branches. So it'll look something kind of like this. You have a big branch. You have the main plant, which is connected to the ground. And you have all these branches shooting off. If you could see me right now, I'm doing this weird thing with my hands imitating branches. It's kind of hilarious. So you have this main stem. You have all these branches. The main stem is what's connected, and the branches are connected to the main stem, right? What Jesus is saying is that he is the vine, right? He is that main stem connected to the ground, to the sustained earth, how you're getting the nutrients, how you're getting the water. Branches that do not produce fruit will be cut off, and those that do produce fruit will be pruned. Cap, from last week, what does prune mean? I'll give you a second. Any day now. Is when you trim and cut down like the dead parts of the branch, the parts that aren't producing quite enough, and they actually reduce the extent that all the nutrients has to go, and it removes all that superfluous, all that extra unwanted parts, all those extra unwanted parts, to make it so you can actually produce more fruit. Branches are producing the fruit, but they can only produce that fruit if they're attached to the vine. Right? Let's look at apple trees. We as Christians love the apple metaphor because we think Adam and Eve ate an apple in the yard. You can ask Pastor Drew. He's very, very passionate about saying it wasn't an apple. But let's use an apple tree as an example. Apple tree, you have that main trunk, and it has those branches that have these apples. If you cut off a branch of an apple tree and it falls to the ground, now you just have a stick. And this stick can't grow an apple. When I was a kid, my brother and I used to go outside all the time and collect these sticks that look kind of like swords, and we would just battle in the yard. Our parents didn't like it, so don't tell them that we did that, but it was fun. But those branches that we grabbed, those dead sticks, those dead branches that fell off of trees, those weren't producing any fruit. They can't produce any fruit because they dead, right? They are not connected to any form of life source. So because they're not connected to any form of life source, how can they produce anything? It would be kind of funny if while we're swinging this sword, all of a sudden there's an apple that pops up and it's like, a mace. Because they're separated, they can't produce anything. Jesus is saying that those who stay connected to him, because he is the vine, they can produce fruit. Whereas if you're not connected to him, you're not connected to life, so you can't. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter how hard you try. If you're not connected to the source of life, how can you produce anything, right? That's what we're talking today, is a matter of being connected and bearing fruit. He's not saying we're literally going to bear fruit like apple. Yum. He's not saying we're going to actually have fruit come out of our bodies. So what's this fruit that Jesus is talking about? The best way I can kind of simply describe it is fruit is what you produce, right? And produce with your mouth and with your hands, right? So the words you say and the actions that you do, those are the fruits that you produce, right? Are the one that produce fruit that's Christ-like, like love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, all that stuff, that comes from Christ. And you can't produce those things unless you're connected to Christ, right? And interestingly enough, as much as I make fun of myself for using the plant analogy more than 1 week in a row, that kind of analogy is continually used in the Bible. In Matthew, right? In Matthew 7:16-20, it even talks about how we will be recognized by our fruits. It reads like this: "You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. So every tree that does not produce good fruit is chopped down and thrown in the fire. Yes, just like you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can also identify a person by their actions. Good people produce good fruit, right? Good trees, good plants produce good fruit. So Christ, good person, good fruit. To produce fruit like Christ, you have to be connected to Christ. Something I'm worried about is that we are starting to get disconnected. Not just in a way that we can't meet up in person, because that's important, but that's not everything. I'm worried that we're getting disconnected in our isolation from other people, that we are also isolating ourselves from God. Because it's really, really easy when you feel alone to continue to actually make yourself alone. When I was younger, I was really sick, and I ended up missing, half of 6th grade, all of 7th grade, half of 8th grade, half of 9th grade. I was really, really lonely in that time. I think you're kind of quarantined now, where you're stuck at home and you can't do much, but actually being sick and other people actually not being sick, so they're allowed to do whatever they want to do. In that isolation, I found myself pushing other people away. I found myself continuing just to kind of like retract myself into this little palace that I built, these walls that I built around my heart to not let anyone in. And I was really upset. But ultimately, like, the original isolation came from a circumstance beyond my control. But it got worse because of what I did. Because we as humans, especially me, but we as humans, have a tendency to, if we're in isolation, to continue to isolate ourselves. And not just cut off from people, we end up cutting ourselves off from God, and that's like that's danger. That's kind of where I'm going with this today is I don't want to see you guys get disconnected, not just from people, not just from me, but also from God. Because ultimately, if you're connected to God, you're going to be okay. Remember we talked about this last week. You're not the main character, he is, and he has a plan that's going to ultimately, in the end, prosper you. And if you're disconnected, you're not going to see that. In fact, if you're disconnected, I'm afraid worse is going to happen. Because remember, those dead branches that fall off of those trees, they can't produce anything. They dead. Continue going with the plant kind of analogy. I don't know if you guys have ever grown something. I remember when I was in like 4th grade, we ended up growing like a lima bean in a bag, you know. And whenever you make something, whenever you grow something, I don't know if you guys have noticed, with me, I get really attached to it. For example, if I write a song and I share it with people and they say, oh, that song sucks, and they rip up the page in front of me, I might cry. If God made you, how attached do you think he is? The answer is a lot. So, if Jesus is the vine, we are the branches, and God grew us, ultimately he's attached to us. And he wants to see us thrive and grow and produce fruit. But he's also reminding you that you can't do that on your own. You're a stick. You're a branch. You can't just fall off the tree. You can't just fall off the plant and then hope to produce fruit. No. He's saying produce fruit, but not just fruit. Produce good fruit. And to do that, be attached to me. He has a plan. He knows what's best for you, and that's why he's saying this. Not because he's prideful or arrogant, but because he knows that he is the only source of goodness. School continues at home. As you continue, guys, to be smart and self-isolate, just remember to stay connected, not just to people. Like, yes, reach out to us, text us. You guys have our numbers. Call us. We miss you guys a lot. Call us, reach out to us, reach out to your friends, but also stay connected to Jesus, because I don't want to just see you die in this time. I want to see you survive, and not just survive. I want to see you thrive. Stay connected with each other, stay connected with Jesus, and stay connected with this YouTube channel by subscribing for notifications. What?